we all know that today is the National Day of Remembrance and Action, but a lot of us actually feel that there's an overemphasis on the remembrance side of that, right? And so in terms of action, what are some thoughts on what can be done, or what are your thoughts on that in general? Do you feel like there's an overemphasis on remembrance and not so much on action, and what can we do about that?
I have so many feelings about this day. I've been actually giving keynotes all week around this Day of Remembrance, and the things that I've really spoken to a lot are, one, recognizing that depending on your social location, you have a different kind of responsibility when it comes to addressing systemic violence. For those of us who are living and experiencing it, most of our work is really in self-care and community care. And so it troubles me when we have conversations that are not nuanced enough, that say, like, this is what we all have to do, or this is what the work, because it's really different for different people. And also the idea that everyone has to do work is also really ableist, and I don't really think that that's true at all. And so that some people can just be remembering or resting, and that is also really valuable and important and a necessary part of the work that we do in community. So today I was at this event and they showed this video. You can see it online, and it's this campaign coming up called 1 Billion Rising for V-Day. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. I actually think it's really problematic. I really, really think it's a really challenging campaign. So the way that the campaign works, they have a video where they show basically different women of color all around the world experiencing violence. And so trigger warning, because they're really graphic. I'm not going to describe it in great detail, but they show some women clearly like in Africa and female genital mutilation happening. And then they show a woman being raped. And then they show a woman like in an abusive relationship. So they show all of these things in ways that are actually really sensationalized and are really not necessary and are really re-triggering for people who are, one, living that right now and who have very, very recently lived it. And then their whole thing is that all women on this day, on V-Day, are going to stop what they're doing and start dancing in response to these experiences of violence. So in the video, what happens is all these women in these different violent contexts, and all the women of color are experiencing like very intense violence. And the one white woman who's showcased in the video is having someone at work who's touching her hair unwantedly, right? So all of the women in all of these different contexts, all of a sudden the ground starts to shake. And then the violence that's happening stops, or like all of the women all of a sudden stand up from the violence that's happening and start to dance. For me, that it's things like that happen around days like this, these movements that are so superficial and don't at all take into consideration the very direct voices of the women in those communities who have explicitly said what they need, which is not dancing. And that is not, like, I'm someone who twerks for justice all the time. I believe in booty popping as a very meaningful part of my resistance. However, at the same time, I know that when you're experiencing direct violence, someone is hurting you in that moment, you can't get up and dance. That's not what our movement building is gonna look like. It's so insulting. And to have the people who are organizing this being like privileged white women who have women of color working as nannies in their homes and serving them Starbucks coffee and cleaning their toilets, and now you're telling me that the ways in which I need to deal with systemic violence is by dancing about it. So for me, when I think about what our tactics are and what our work is on days like this and what our actions are, one, I want to recall that like women and trans folks have been defining resistance for hundreds of years. It wasn't like in the 60s, it wasn't like, those were not our movements. Like 1492 was when we started resistance. Like this was a long ass time ago. And I also really want to say that we need to affirm and amplify the work that's already happening. It's not necessarily even about creating more movements. Like people are already doing the works in their communities that really, really needs to happen. And so it's about finding out what's happening and being able to affirm that. And actually listening to people, like listening to community members, listening to women who are in prison who say, I need you to not lock me up while I'm giving birth. listening to or recognizing the fact that First Nations women continually are forced to be sterilized in this country. Like, these things are happening, and you could literally just talk to those women and they would tell you, I don't want you to do this. This is how it would end systemic violence for me. So for me, it's really about like actually affirming that these voices and these movements are already happening, have continuously happened, and that they've been ignored repeatedly on purpose for specific reasons that are capitalist in nature.
Hard act to follow. Yeah, I agree that there's so much work already going on, and I agree that sometimes it's important to remember and to honor, and other times it's important to be more active. I think that, again, from the perspective from where I'm coming from, and I'm so glad that you said, our responsibilities are different depending on our social location. But I think, again, coming from where I'm coming from, particularly at these times when First Nations peoples, families, territories, and communities are so, specifically being targeted by this omnibus bill that's gone through. I think that we really have to look at maintaining our communities, maintaining our integrity as communities, maintaining our connection to our lands, and I think that really does tie in to or provide a great deal of answers to these issues around violence. I think that for Indigenous folks, recalling, recovering, reviving the culture, living the culture on land is very important. And I was just saying to Jorge that I was currently reading a book where, for the first time, I'm reading scholars who are actually advocating, going back to the land, reforming, reviving, maintaining the health of communities, and reclaiming those lifeways that were so gentle and so kind, and also while we're doing that, readying ourselves to defend, those communities and those territories and those lands, because they will be coming under assault. Indian country today, read a headline. There's a lot of articles coming out now. The headline that I read yesterday was we're at war kind of thing, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think there's a lot of communities that are doing it, but I sometimes think that sometimes it's not all that obvious. What can lead to healing and resolution. And yeah, for Indigenous communities, I think that the leadership. I mean, I spoke actually at the roundtable. There was a roundtable that Black Coffee Poet sponsored last year around this question of the forgotten women of December 6th, and I talked then about some of the efforts of within Indigenous communities to stop, depending on government funding, because we obviously can't. And always going and expecting, authorities to change their ways, and because we ask, and depending on that, on our movements. But to just take up, to do things for ourselves in our communities, to take up our power, to empower ourselves and each other, and find our own solutions that work for us, and when we found them, defend them.
So I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to make 2 points. So let's reframe the narrative. So right now it's December 6th, it's 2012. Say December 6th, 1989, 20 minutes outside of Montreal, the Kahnawake Reserve. So instead of 14 white women being killed in Montreal, let's say 14 young Mohawk women were killed at the local high school on the reserve. Would we be here? Would there have been a vigil that night? Would there be a group women won't forget? Would there be a December 6th? So, something to think about. I go every year to December 6th actually, and I'm very critical of December 6th. And that's why Zainab and others did that roundtable. But I'm not just critical of the organizers and the event. If you can see, there's a sign that I have. Thank you, Kim. So I've held this sign up at the event for years now. Before I had a sign that said Native women are loved, and that was safe. But then when I had Aboriginal women, Latino women, Mestizo women, women of color, trans women, and I don't have even other women that I love, sex workers, disabled women, on the list. When people who aren't on that list see this sign at December 6th, I've gotten cut-eye, I've gotten just really bad looks. So that's pretty sad if you're there to remember women, and then when I've got a sign that is remembering women, you're mad because they're not on that list. It shows how it's not just the organizers that need to do some work, it's the attendees there. So my third point is the importance of being a body at December 6th. So when I was asked to speak here, I was talking about it with Zainab, and I was a little bit conflicted because I want to be a body at December 6th that can hold a sign like this. And there's not many signs like this. And there's a lot of tokenizing going on December 6th. People have been challenging them over the years, and a lot of people do work. It's not just us three on the panel. We're talking about a lot of people do work to challenge this and all kinds of stuff. So those are the things that I wanted to say right now is keep in mind that question. Also, I do feel it's important to be me personally, a body there with this sign, and that we have a lot of work to do. It's not just the organizers of the event, it's attendees of the event. And imagine all the events that are happening today across the country. There's a lot of people attending. Now, I've only been to one in Toronto, but every year I have people who give me cut-eye, who don't like this sign. So, something to think about.